Welcome to Satsunami. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Satsunami. I'm Satsunami and joining me today in my very own Task Force 141, hope I've remembered that right, is my very good friend Adam. Adam, welcome back.
Roger, coming through loud and clear. Alpha Bravo, bogey on your tail.
Zulu, barrel roll, yeah. Yeah, that's the game we're talking about today, isn't it? Super
There
Mario. Yeah. Yeah, I swear.
Yeah.
I swear we're pro players, you know. Like, top 10 of something. Something league.
Don't lump me in. Don't make false promises for me.
I forgot.
Definitely cannot back up that.
Yeah, I forgot, because you're a pro Halo player instead, aren't you?
That's the one game I mastered one of my very first games, and I never bothered after that. I was like, well, no need to master any other games now.
Yeah, you just put your feet up and you're like, this is it. This is where I've peaked in my gaming career.
I'm sure the original Halo will still be played 20 years down the line.
It's like, you know that Simpsons episode where they're listening to, like, it's disco or something, and it's like Homer as a teenager, and Grandpa comes in and he's like, what the hell are you doing? He's like, oh, you wouldn't understand, old man. It's like, this is the future. It's like, you know what, back in my day that used to be hip, but now it's not, and it's gonna happen to you. And it's like us looking back going, yeah, Call of Duty's gonna go on forever. As we cry in Verdansk because we get shot for the 50th time by an aimbot. So yeah, by that very subtle saltiness, yeah, you can tell we are going to be talking about, let's face it, quite frankly, one of the best series in terms of Call of Duty. That, of course, being the Modern Warfare series. And I'm quite curious, like, when was it that you got introduced to this series? Like, was it right at the beginning, or was it, like, later on?
No, I was there from the beginning, baby. I was, like, my first Call of Duty game was called Call of Duty Finest Hour, which was the one that was only released on consoles back in 2004. Yeah. And then every year after that, I got the next Call of Duty game. So I got hooked into the series early. So I was like, I was established Call of Duty. Well, I say established Call of Duty player, but I was established Call of Duty fan by 2007 when the first Modern Warfare came out. And got hooked.
Do you have any qualifications to back that claim up?
I have many. I won't be sharing those with you because my printer's broken.
Ah, of course, yeah. Yep, carry on.
And also I'm going to disconnect my Wi-Fi after this and smash up the router, so...
Oh, no. Okay, so this is Adam's last episode in Satsunami today.
No, it was fun, guys.
It's a fun run.
Thanks for all the memories.
Yeah, let me just play, like, the really sad flashback.
I will...
No, go on.
I was going to do the Sarah McLachlan Oscar song where it's like, I will remember you. As like a slow montage of my greatest fails plays over. And
it's just like your muted sandwich talking.
R.I.P. sandwich.
Yeah, he was eaten too soon.
I'm going to the buffet bar in the sky.
Oh my god. Yeah, moving on. Oh god.
Yeah, this went off the rails quickly.
This really did. God forbid if we didn't have a topic to talk about. I think it would just go right off the rails. But anyway, sorry, back on track. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I think my first game was probably Call of Duty 3. Or COD 3, like, I'm using its, formal Christian name. It's like, please, Call of Duty was my father's name. Call me COD 3. I always remember, and I think I've brought this up in previous Satsunami episodes, but I remember when I was younger, I don't want to say, like, I had, like, really strict parents, but, like, my parents were always wary about, the age ratings and things.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really allowed to play, like, any games that were, like a 15, if I wasn't 15. So see, as soon as I reached the tender age of 15 years old, something snapped in my head and I think I just went mad with FPS games and just started playing them all. Like, I was always interested in them, but I always had to play them like at a friend's or something. But then I played Call of Duty 3 for the first time and absolutely got hooked on it. But after that, I never actually got into Modern Warfare. I never bought it. I don't know if it's just because I was one of those people that I was seeing, I think at the time when Modern Warfare came out, this is when like the kind of trend of FPS games were kind of shifting. When Call of Duty first came out, it was all about the World War II games, wasn't it? You know, the...
Yeah.
Yeah, let's repel the, Germans from France and everything. And Satsunami summary of World War II. Thank you very much. And yeah, it was all about that, the just basically World War II shooter games. But when Call of Duty Modern Warfare came out, that was about 2007. And
2007, yeah.
yeah, that was about when like Battlefield was doing the same thing. Other shooters were getting into the modern scene because it was just it was a matter of like oversaturation, wasn't it?
Certainly,
Like,
World War II had run its course as a setting.
Yeah.
I will say not for me though. I was bitterly disappointed when I heard this when Call of Duty 4 was going to be in the modern setting, because I am and have been a history buff, and like I loved my World War II game. So I for one was bitterly disappointed, but I think the world at large was ready to move on to a new arena of combat.
I think I was the same because I'd just got into COD 3. So like going to COD 3 and then everyone's like, "Oh, we're playing Modern Warfare instead," and you're like, "Wait, no, I've just got here."
Man.
Because I think I got that, and then the next Call of Duty game I got was either World at War or Modern Warfare 2. I can't actually remember. I'm sure it was one of them, but like I think maybe it was World at War. And it was just because it was in the World War II setting. It was a lot more, it was a lot more historical and everything, minus the zombies, but let's not talk about that. But with Modern Warfare, I actually didn't get that till much later. I actually played Modern Warfare 2, I think. Yeah, it was Modern Warfare 2 that I played before the first one. So, yeah, imagine my surprise. I was confused with a lot of the flashbacks. not all of them, mind you, but just some of them. I was like, who's that guy? Who's that guy? What did that guy say when that guy spoke? You
love jumping into your first-person shooter series like a good way into it, don't you?
I really do.
This is the same thing with Halo and other ones.
Can I just say, the only reason I did jump into Modern Warfare in the second one was because I got an Xbox 360 and that was one of the free games that came with it. And I remember playing it for hours on Christmas Day, and I was like, "Oh, this is such a good game." And then I completed the campaign a couple hours later and I was like, well, shit. What now? And I couldn't get online because I think we spoke about this in the last we were talking about the Xbox in the last Satsunami episode, but it was the fact that I didn't have one of the dongles that you could put in. So at the time I didn't have access to the multiplayer. I was stuck replaying the campaign. But let's face it, what a campaign it is. In fact, have I ever told you the story of when I tried to buy this game and it was on holiday?
I don't believe you have.
So I was on holiday to, I think it might have been the Lake District. So down in England, I went down with my family and we were going by just this game shop, and I was like, oh, went in as my child self. And I'm like, oh, let's see. And picked it up. I went to hand over the money, and you know how there's a stereotype, kind of just to briefly explain, there's a stereotype where if you hand in the Scottish version of a British pound note to an English shop, 9 times out of 10 they are going to say something to you. What the hell is this? Because that honestly, I vividly remember trying to get a copy of Modern Warfare, and they took my money and they looked at the money and they were like, oh, what's this? And they made a big thing about it, and it's like, listen, I want to go home and play Call of Duty. Just let me out your shop and I can play Call of Duty. And yeah, fun times down south. It's an interesting series.
Oh, definitely. There's certainly a lot to talk about in it. both in terms of good stuff and bad stuff and controversial stuff. There's a lot of material in it. But yeah.
Yeah. So just to kind of give you guys listening a kind of heads up, we're going to be diving into the original Modern Warfare series. So we're going to be talking about Modern Warfare 1 through to 3. We are also going to be touching on the reboot, soft reboot, hard reboot, reboot for 2019's Modern Warfare as well. So yeah, there will be spoilers abound. And that'll give you, Adam, free rein to rant about the good and the bad of these campaigns.
Excellent.
So, out of curiosity, focusing on the very first 3 games of this series, how would you describe it to someone who's got no idea about this series, no idea about the franchise. How would you like sell these games?
So, for the original Modern Warfare trilogy, they are first-person shooters that are set in a quasi-realistic version of our like contemporary world, or they were contemporary at the time. That focus. God, I don't know how to describe it. Like
The realms
this is
are
really difficult. I don't actually know what to say. Yeah, so it's the focus on like a mix of both high octane like set piece action, but also more lower level, small scale, kind of undercover action as well. Like that is the worst of all these terrible summaries I've done of games. That is by far the worst I've ever done. So apologies, but
No.
I struggle to think how we would describe these. I mean, they're modern. I suppose the quote is like modern military shooters. I suppose is the catch-all term. But to actually try and describe what these, because the thing about the original trilogy is like it goes on quite an arc.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you look, they are quite one is quite tonally different from 2 and 3. 2 and 3 are a bit more closer together because 1 is very much the original Modern Warfare was very much. It felt like almost like a kind of it felt more realistic sort of depiction of like military action and things like that than previous Call of Duties, while 2 and 3 went far more into the kind of Hollywood Michael Bay-esque action type thing of big set pieces, and like world wars and stuff, while the first one was a far more kind of small scale localized, almost like kind of to an extent Black Ops sort of type deal.
See, I was actually thinking about that when you were. I don't want to say you were struggling to describe.
Oh, I was struggling. I was floundering.
But that's the thing, though. It's exactly you've hit the nail on the head there when you say they're so tonally different. Because I think we've touched on this before when we did our Black Ops retrospective video or retrospective episodes in Satsunami. But it's weird to see that Modern Warfare is this very Don't get me wrong. It's not like 100% accurate and everything, obviously. It's still a video game. But at the same time, it is probably, out the series, it is probably the most realistic out the three of them.
Certainly the first one.
Definitely. The first one, absolutely, because they've got the guns. And one of the interesting things as well is the attention to detail as well. Like there's one mission where basically you're in the viewpoint of a AC-130, which is just like this big bomber ship, and you have to cover your squad mates running across this field. But the game actually stops you from blowing up. Like if you see a church or a building that's protected and you bomb it, then the game automatically fails you and says, nope, try again, because it's against the Geneva Convention. And I thought, that's a really nice touch, it's really neat to see this kind of care and attention. And the reason I'm laughing is because see if you flash forward to the third game, that game features the Eiffel Tower getting bombed by the Americans.
Yeah.
And, you can read into that if you want, but... yeah, I'm pretty sure that's against some kind of convention. Yeah, it's like the first one, as you said, is very realistic. It's a lot more intimate at times, I would say, because what is quite interesting is it's quite a subversive game. I feel like the first, there's two halves to it. There's the one half where you're in Task Force 141, which is like this British SAS.
I'm going to correct you, Task Force 141 doesn't come in until
is it not? Is it not? Right.
You're just the SAS.
Oh, it's just the SAS. Okay, thank you. See, this is why I brought you on.
Well, I have to make up for it after my complete flub at the beginning. I need to redeem myself somehow.
No, but it honestly, but it just shows how different these games are.
Yeah.
As I was saying, you've got the SAS Strike Force team who are hunting. Is Zakayev, isn't it? Or Zakayev?
You pick. I've heard it both ways.
Yeah, pick your pronunciation. Who is this ultra nationalist who is basically trying to take over Russia. After the Cold War and make everything wonderful. And spoilers, he's a bit of a dick, but just putting it nicely. So on the one hand, you are hunting them down, and you're also hunting down another dictator as well. But on the flip side, you are going through it as more of kind of a traditional Call of Duty game where you play as just a foot soldier in the American army, basically invading. Is it a made up country that they go into? It's basically.
I think they never actually give it a name.
Yeah.
Like if you and like what this game does is like in your loading screen, it like zooms in on a part of the world that you're in, and then it kind of zooms in. And if you look at like the loading screens for that American mission, they kind of jump all over from like Saudi Arabia to like Iran to Persia. Like this game is banned in Yemen. It was banned in Yemen because they believed the Yemenese government claimed that it was like the country that the Americans were invading was supposed to be Yemen. But yeah, they never actually gave it a name. But I think it's meant to be fictional
because it is very much just like, I don't want to say generic Middle East because obviously the Middle East is massive, but you know, it was like, especially at the time this game was made, it was kind of topical. I think a lot of people like watching this or you know, watching the game when it came out thinking, yeah, it's clear where their inspiration came from. But yeah, you play as like an American foot soldier, and initially it is just your standard fare of you're hunting for this like the dictator of the country, who has essentially, he starts the game off with a bang, no pun intended, by like shooting the democratically elected president, I think, or whoever the leader is, executing them live to the world. And
in the face.
Yeah, it's just like, oh yeah, and you get to be like the point of view for that. You're like, oh boy, what are we going to do to it? Oh no. And yeah, you basically hunt him down and you think, oh, okay, this is your standard fare, America and all of this. And then there's one level, which I think is fantastically done, that just subverts, I mean, at the time anyway, it definitely subverted the way that FPS games were kind of seen, or like certain levels were seen, I would say. That, of course, being the Aftermath level, where you have this big, bombastic, like, not Saving Private Ryan, but you know, it's like you see like one of your, you know, comrades, like helicopters fall down and crash, and you have to run in, you know, with your teammates and like basically like shoo off the attackers. You're like, shoo, get away,
get out of here,
shoo. Yeah, and you grab, you know, the pilot and you run back to your helicopter, and while this is all happening, you're hearing in your, like, intercom that, or not intercom, but your earpiece, like, we've found, like, a nuclear device. We need to, like, disarm it, so, like, everybody has to fall back. So, you know, while that's going on, you think, right, okay, let's be the hero, let's get the thing. And you're expecting the bomb to be, like, defused. But then, like, 2 seconds later, they're like, oh, yeah, it's like, you know when you're at a job, right, and you're clearly doing something terrible, and your boss phones you up and it's like, how's it going? And you're like, yeah, I think it's pretty fine. And then something goes catastrophically wrong. Yeah, this is the moment in this game where it just blows up. The nuclear weapon blows up. And about, I think they quote it's like 30,000 American troops get like utterly obliterated. And it's bad enough, like obviously you get caught in the blast, but you survive, like the aftermath, and you're like crawling through like the nuclear wasteland of this city. It's really haunting. Like, what was your reaction when you first saw it?
I mean, oh yeah, like it's something so different. And this game was full of those moments. It was full of so many moments that just we were like, I've never seen this in like a first person shooter. Maybe like I'd certainly not seen the game before, as you say, like that one where like you crawl out of the wreckage and like there's a, you know, the city's on fire, the mushroom clouds in the back. We're doing spoilers, right?
Yeah.
We're doing spoilers. And then you die of radiation poisoning at the end. It's like, what the? You know, this is something that never happened, like I know of in a video game, a first-person shooter or video game before. I think the thing with this is so many of these moments became kind of cliche because they kept being used in the Call of Duty games afterwards. But actually at the time, they were really, really like striking moments. Like that gunship mission, the one you talked about, the AC-130, that was something so different as well. And it was like this way of, you know, you're playing doing this kind of like dehumanized like combat in a way, because you can, like, as you're playing along, like you can hear all the guys like on the TV screens who are like miles away, you know, whoever like firing these guns, they're all just like hot dog and like, you know, like oh, there goes another one and stuff, and they do it in this way, but it's like done it's like war at a distance, which, you know, wasn't a feature of these kind of games before. And just like the minute where you get shot, where you play as a democratic president is a novel invention for an FPS game, but then also to get shot in the face early on. Just it was a game full of these things, like kind of mirroring real world events to an extent as well. So like kind of obviously it was like a more, you know, it wasn't like a totally realistic version of our world, but there was enough mirrored stuff there to be like, you know, like, oh god, I recognize this kind of this world, you know, that these characters inhabit.
Yeah, it is, and it does a lot of things really well in that aspect. Like, I'm actually thinking about a particular level that's a favourite of yours, and It's something that I have to admit I agreed with you when you were talking about it. You brought it up in when we were talking about our favourite video game levels. I think that was a couple of episodes ago. That, of course, being All Gillied Up. I have to admit, I don't think I've seen like a stealth mission as... Well, there obviously have been like stealth mission levels and things in games since, but I don't think I've seen one as well done. So I'm going to let you describe what makes this so good, because I know it's a favourite of yours.
Oh, it is dear, close to near and dear to my heart. Again, it was just something so different. So it's a mission that basically you play as a young Captain Price, who's one of the main figures in the Modern Warfare series, and you're part of a 2-man SAS team who's sent to infiltrate the town of Pripyat, which is the town that was next to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant that was basically now a ghost town after that, after the reactor melted down. And so you need to infiltrate this place to assassinate Imran. That's the one. Yeah. Sorry, Victor's his son. Imran Zakhaev. You need to assassinate him. Spoiler alert: you fail. But and then the whole mission was built around trying to avoid combat, which again was such a unique thing for a Call of Duty game, because none of the others, I'm racking my brain, but none of the previous titles had anything close to a stealth mission. But this one, like, you could engage in combat, but he also gave you a level of choice about how you wanted to approach things. You know, your team leader would be like, oh, you know, you can take these guys out, or we can try and sneak around them. Your call. There were consequences for if you took out a particular group of guys, but then left another group of guys. You know, it was in an evolving world. It was such a fantastic setting as well, just this irradiated city, and it was just something so different, and it was just such a change of pace, and it really stood out. And you know, it was something so different, this really kind of small scale localized event, but the stakes were so high and the tension was all there. And they've never, in my opinion, been able to replicate the mission like that again. And I said I've never played a stealth mission outside of a non-stealth game that's had anywhere close to that kind of amazing design and level of tension. So I just love it.
I completely agree. It's just one of those missions that hits all the right notes. Even when you go to... So basically, as you said, you have to sneak through, and then at the very end you have to scale up this tower, and you have to properly snipe or attempt to snipe Zakhaev. And unfortunately, obviously you fail, but because you're so far away, you have to take into account wind resistance and things like that, and you have to calculate your shot, which I thought was really interesting. I don't think I've really done that concept since, really, because I think because Call of Duty evolved into futuristic shooters, that for some reason now all bullets have wee mini rockets attached to them, so they just keep going in a straight line, except for there's some examples, but overall in the campaigns and things, that's what you were kind of dealing with. But for this, they talk about the Coriolis effect, they talk about having to make sure, they even say watch the flag on the car, and that'll tell you where the wind's coming from, which I thought was so clever. Just throughout the game, there's just small moments like that just, honestly, it makes it such a really an example of why people love the game so much. I'm gonna tone the praise down, and I'm gonna ask you, if there was one thing you could criticise about the game, what would you say?
Ooh, it's difficult, because I do love this game. I think some of the missions are a bit lackluster. It unfortunately came at a time where still video game tutorial missions were very much, here's the first level of the game and we're going to teach you everything, so it can be a little bit of a plod to begin with. I mean, it's quite cool. It ends with a kind of training sequence where you basically practicing for the next mission. And I think that's quite fun, because also it gives you a time element where you try and beat the top time and everything. But the bit before that is a little bit, I mean, it has the great fruit killing skills line, which is great and will never be bettered in video game history. But it's a bit of a plod. Some of the other missions as well, there are a couple that just don't feel as fresh and exciting and feel a bit more kind of standard fare for a Call of Duty game. Also, Mile High Club on Veteran is just shouldn't exist, and it's horrible. So dock the game points for that. But these are all kind of minor things. I don't genuinely have any sort of big problem with this game. I mean, maybe one thing I'd say is that it's not even the game's fault, but it did set a lot of things that then became cliches and became overused. But again, that's kind of unfair to blame the game for that, because they were really great at the time when they started. Things like your main character, one of the main characters dying, and sort of moments like the AC-130 gunship mission. I don't know what you class those as, but kind of technology sort of stuff. Those bits kind of became very prevalent. But again, I don't know. You can't really hold that against the game for trying something new that then was so good that it became like overused. So yeah, minor points. I have no major problems with this game. Honestly, I love it.
I honestly feel like I do agree with all of that, especially the Mile High Club thing, but I will touch on that because I see if you're playing this game on like regular, then you know it's like you're kind of plodding along for the story, which is perfectly fine. But see if you play this game in veteran, prepare to have a hard time. And I mean this. This is probably one of the worst experiences I have ever had trying to play like a game on its hardest difficulty. And I can hear all the Dark Soul fans going, "Haha, get good," but no, legit. It is one of those games where it almost encourages you to be campy, except when people start throwing grenades out of nowhere, and then because this was a problem in like Modern Warfare and it's the next game, World at War, where if you were playing this game in veteran and you were sitting for too long, the enemies would just lob grenades at you, and you would just be like, "Well, shit, I've got to run from cover." So you run from cover, and then you just get shot right away, and it was just some of the cheapest like shots. You were like, come on. But again, that's like a minor thing. I think as well, the kind of, not so much the AI, because I will get to that when we talk about the reboot of this game. I have very strong words about the AI in that game, but some of it's a bit janky. But overall, like, it is definitely worth looping back, especially now the remaster is out.
Yeah.
And I mean, speaking of the remaster, they've just remastered, well, last year they remastered the second game of this series. And I mean, talk about like I was going to say step up, but I mean, where do we even begin with the sequel? Like, as you said, the sequel is very much like a Michael Bay-esque, just bombastic. Like, if you play the first one, and then, because I think, because I approached it like in the opposite way, like I came in at the sequel and then I played the first one, and then it was kind of like, okay, this is a bit more reserved. Like, how did you feel about it going from the first one to the second?
This game, Modern Warfare 2, for quite a few years was my favourite game of all time.
Same.
For a while after I played it. I absolutely adored it. I mean, looking back now, I think I still love it, but I think I prefer Call of Duty 4 now. I think that's like the peak of the series. I think that's the one that holds up a bit better than 2. But for a long time, this was my favourite, Modern Warfare 2. And because I remember, I loved 4 so much. I loved the original Modern Warfare so much that I was really, really excited when Modern Warfare 2 was coming out. And I remember getting it. I was at boarding school at the time this came out. But I think, if I remember rightly, I got my mum to buy a copy and send it to me. And it arrived. And I remember staying up the whole night and playing this and trying to dodge teachers and stuff as they came around to check to see everybody was asleep. But I played this all in one day because I was that excited for it. And yeah, like it's a very different direction. Like it's still the modern world. Well, it's not quite contemporary because they were set like a couple years ahead of when they came out. But I think the original Modern Warfare is supposed to be like 2011. It was like released 2007. There's about 4 years ahead, I think, of when like the actual time they were released. But it goes on a much bigger scale. So everything's ramped up now. Like the whole basically main point is basically like a third world war basically breaks out. Well, this was not actually a third world war at the time, but Russia basically declares war on America and invades. And that becomes like, the second half of the story is really focused on that. And everything's just much bigger, like, now, like, essentially, so you're involved in these, like, massive scale battles in, like, Virginia and Washington, D.C. While at the same time, you're playing as, like, this Task Force 141, which is, like, a combination of all, like, Western world's, like, elite military forces, so, like, the SAS, the Rangers, CIA, people like that. And they're hunting down this terrorist called Makarov, who is like a disciple of Imran Zakayev, and is now basically leading the ultra-nationalist camp. And the ultra-nationalists have taken over control of Russia at this point, and basically Makarov manages to instigate an incident, which I'm sure we'll get into more, that leads to Russia declaring war on America. And so basically, like, the game between like the defense of America and this group trying to track down Makarov. And other stuff happens as well, but it was just on such a more bombastic scale, and the missions reflected that as well. Like there was no kind of all gillied up stuff. There were some stealth sections, but there was no like stealth mission like all gillied up. Instead, you had like epic like snowmobile chases and like massive battles. I say like retaking the White House and massive battles through like favelas in Sao Paulo. It was on such a bigger scale than the sort of action had been in Call of Duty 4.
I think if you want like an idea of how different the fourth game is, so like the first Modern Warfare and this one, watch the trailers. And this might sound weird because you'll be like, wait, why? But if you watch the Modern Warfare trailer, you'll see like a very somber tone getting set, like a very serious one, where it pans over Pripyat and you see like the abandoned town, you see like the burnt out husks of like the Ferris wheel, and you hear like one of the characters, Captain Price, like narrate and say, 50,000 people used to live here, now it's a ghost town, and it flashes through like a lot of the like scenes in the game, and it sets a serious tone of we're gonna go in, we're gonna kick ass kind of thing. For Modern Warfare 2, they start with a Eminem rap. And American soldiers rolling through not Middle Eastern Stan, and just like,
well, it's Afghanistan. Like they actually come up.
Oh, is it actually Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Really?
It's, like they come out and say it. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Because I wasn't sure, because as we said, like the first one, they kind of like skirted around it. Unless they do say like, if like I'm getting this wrong, guys, like feel free to let me know in the comments or send me a message saying, Satsu, you're wrong. Kind regards. But I don't know that. But as you said, it's a lot more bombastic. And don't get me wrong, it's not the worst thing. It's just that it's quite intense though after coming from the first game, which, don't get me wrong, the like first game ends where you're getting chased by the main guy, and then you end up like confronting him on a bridge and you shoot him. It's like
such a great ending as well.
Yeah,
one of the best endings in a game, I'd say, ever.
Yeah, whereas like in this game, the way it ends, how to describe this? The way it ends is with a boat chase, and then you end up throwing a knife into the eye of someone who betrayed you, and it's like, oh, okay. And then it cuts, and it's like a cliffhanger, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because even back then, I was really surprised where you end up getting rescued, and you've been stabbed, like your character's been stabbed, and he, like Captain Price, carries you to this helicopter, and the pilot who you saved in the first game is like, "Duh, I know a place," and then that's it. The game cuts, so it's like, wait, what? No. It's like, where's the rest of the game? It's like, but there was no rest of the game. That was it. And it was like, ugh. I would say the ending's a bit like, I wouldn't say it's anticlimactic, because it's definitely not, but just that one scene, like if they had like 2 more minutes, just anything. Yeah, would you say this was an improvement on the first game?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say it's an improvement. Mm-hmm. I think it's a continuation, because I think it kept a lot of the good things from the first Modern Warfare. I don't think it improved. I'm trying to think of any aspect it improved on. Like, I'm sure there's probably something it did improve on, but I think in general terms, I think it's a good continuation, but I think it's maybe a slight step back, ever so slight, not like a full one, but a slight nudge back. Yeah. I would say
gameplay wise, it's a step up, but in terms of story, it's a bit fan fiction-y. And I can't believe I'm saying that to describe a Call of Duty game, but you know what I mean. It's like, oh, look, it's Russia invading the whole of America, or not the whole of America, but like the East Coast, and it's like, oh no,
it's pretty ridiculous.
It is really ridiculous. It's like there is no, what? I'm not even going to go into the technicalities of it, like sitting here like an armchair general, but at the same time, I don't know, like I feel as if it's unbelievable somehow. Like, especially in the day and age that it was meant to be set in. Because I know they explain it like saying, oh, they stealthed under the radar or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, did nobody use their eyes? Or
yeah.
It's like, sure.
It loses the realism that 4 had, and again, 4 wasn't like completely realistic all the time.
Well,
but it had a good grounding. Like Modern Warfare 2 really just ditches that, it jettisons for like to go for a far more bombastic tone.
Oh, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, like I love this game. Like it is one of my favourites, and I know it's one of yours as well. But it's like in terms of story, it's just so shark jumpy. Let's say, it just jumps the shark so many times, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I feel as if it's a fun romp, but it's definitely not. It's not one that you would kind of, like if you're comparing it to the first one, then the first one definitely has the better story. In fact, I would go as far to say that the first one's probably the best one out of this particular trilogy.
I think the first one has the best campaign of any Call of Duty game. I don't think it's ever been bettered, like, out of any of them. Like, the way I look at the Modern Warfare 2 is that it's like watching, like, a really good action film.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's like watching a really good, like, 80s action film with a ridiculous plot and, you know, like a one-man army, like, going through all the odds and everything. Like, and that is a lot of fun. Like, you know, I really like those kind of action films as well. So I'm predisposed to like that kind of idea. But, you know, so I don't think that for me anyway, like, ditching the realism wasn't a detriment. It just moved it in a very, very different direction from what, like, four had been in.
And I mean, before we move on to, like, talk about, like, I don't want to use, like, shark jumping as an adjective now, but, you know, the jumpiest of the sharks when it comes to this particular series, like, for the third one. Like, I will admit, like, I'm pointing this out now, compared to, like, see when we were ranting about, like, Black Ops 3 and how bad it was in comparison to the others. Like, it's not as bad as that, but yeah, before we move on to that one, yeah, we've got to talk about No Russian, because we can't, like, skirt over it without talking about it. That was all over the news, wasn't it?
Do you remember? Like, I remember that. I remember it vividly. Do you remember,
same.
like, the controversy around it?
Like, yeah, all over the news about how the youth were getting corrupted because of this violent video game. So to give you guys context, No Russian is basically this mission where you go undercover with Makarov, and you basically have to attack an airport, which, I'm going to be honest, and this might be a bit controversial, but, like, obviously, in the context of it, it's like a horrific thing. You're basically to go in, and you walk in with basically an LMG, and you start gunning down, like, civilians and, like, just everyone in front of you. And the idea is you're supposed to stage a terror attack, and then that's the kind of catalyst for the game where you eventually at the end get found out as being an American agent. So Makarov kills you, and then the police find you, and then that sparks an incident of, oh, America attacked us, let's invade them, which, yeah, again, but, you know, over the top. But, like, at the time, this was really, really, everybody was talking about this one scene. So much so that you can actually skip it if you feel uncomfortable doing it, which I can completely understand. It is quite a brutal and intense moment in the game. Like, and you can also, one of the things I thought was quite interesting is you can actually play this level and you don't have to shoot anybody.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't penalise you for not taking part in the massacre. Like, your teammates, quote unquote, will do all the killing and you can stay back. One of the things I will be very critical in this game on or this particular level, is the fact that Call of Duty decided that this was going to be, like, a staple of their franchise, to have one controversial moment per game. Because don't get me wrong, like, there have been worse games like than this level. There have definitely been more bloody, gory, horrible, horrible, gribbly stuff. But at the same time, this was like the first Call of Duty, because I think for Modern Warfare, it was the nuke going off that was a controversial one. Then for this one, it was the airport massacre. For the third one, it was exploding children with chemical weapons. And yeah, it's just, it almost felt as if it was like they were trying to one-up, which obviously that's what you do in a series. You always, like, up the stakes, but yeah, will we go into Modern Warfare 3?
Yeah, like, I mean, can I say a little bit about No Russian?
Oh, absolutely. No, sorry.
No, it's just because I think it's such an interesting thing, because I said, like, I remember vividly, like, the debate. This was on, like, over here in Britain, there's a show called Newsnight, which is like a kind of like a very, like, prestigious news, sort of like evening news type show. And I remember, I'm sure, like, there was discussion about this level on there. And, like, this was 2009, like, so, you know, I don't think I ever remember a video game thing ever appearing on Newsnight before. They may have appeared after now, with the industry getting so big. Yeah. But, like, that was a thing in itself. And I remember, like, morning talk shows talking about it as well and everything in this country. It really was, like, a giant, like, phenomenon. It's funny because my reaction to it has changed over time. I remember when I first played it, like, I remember being like, oh, like, everybody is just making such a big deal of this, and, like, it's been blown out of proportion. I'm like, it's just a video game, like, at the end of the day. who cares? Now, that was my opinion for a long time. I did think it was people just getting very like oversensitive about it. But I replayed Modern Warfare 2 last year. And I was going through, and I remember playing it again. And it was actually one point I remember playing. I was like, "God, this is actually really shocking." Yeah. Like, I don't know what it was about, like me now playing it. But I was like, "God, I can actually totally see why people's reaction to this." And I'm like, "This is actually really an uncomfortable level to play." And I don't know why. Maybe it was like the first time I'd properly like actually tried to look at it, like kind of maybe objectively and a bit critically. Well, before I'd just been like, I really loved the game, so I was like, oh, it's a good level and it sets things up and it's a good shock. And but I'm like, God, this is actually quite an uncomfortable level to play. And so it's just funny, like just how my opinion on it has changed over time. And I agree with you. It's a real shame that it became like this. They felt like they had to keep adding something shocking in to each game. At a point you're like, it's like the way that like a main character getting killed off. You're like, oh, what? You're just waiting for it to happen at that point, aren't you? Like,
I'm just thinking, just what you were saying about like changing your opinion on the game. I feel as if, is it not just a case of like us kind of like, I don't want to be like pretentious here and being like, oh, it's just us growing up, but I guess it kind of is, because when we played to begin with, I mean we would only be like in our late teens, so of
I would
course
have been 17.
Yeah, 17. Yeah, same. So it would have been like we saw it in the perspective of, oh, it's just a video game.
Yeah.
But when you actually look into it, you can see like people, like they really put effort into making this shocking. You can see like the slow see that's one of the things that's quite chilling. It's like the scene where you come out the elevator and you see like a couple of people looking round, kind of, and not in slow motion, but it feels as if it's slow motion. They're chatting away, they're going about their daily lives. They turn round and 4 NPCs are just standing there with LMGs, and you're like, oh, this is going to be a bad day, isn't it? And yeah, it's just like you go ahead and these poor people just, it's like it's not something traditionally Call of Duty. It's like I don't really remember any game before this where you could kill anybody that wasn't part of the game, if you know what I mean. Like anyone that wasn't a combatant, like everybody you shoot at up until this game usually like had a gun to shoot back, or you were fighting them or something, whereas this is like, I think this is the first scene or the first like moment in the franchise, and I could be wrong, again, tell me. But yeah, it's the first time where it's like this, these poor people like can't fight back. Like it's all scripted as well, so it's like a horrible Groundhog Day, like it's always gonna happen. And yeah, I guess it is like, now we're kind of grown up, like looking back on it, it is shocking. It is definitely like a really harrowing scene, but as I was saying there, it's like it's just a shame that they looked more at the shock and the controversy rather than taking what that scene could accomplish. It's like the explosion with the nuke. It's like they didn't like throw another nuke in the second game to... Wait, did they? No, they didn't. I was just like... There is a
nuclear explosion.
Oh, there is, yeah. That was one of the weirdest scenes where it's like you get... Sorry, just to explain, guys, it's like when you are in the perspective of like an astronaut that gets blown away, and it's like it's all of like 5 seconds. Or not 5 seconds, but it's not a long time at all, and you're just like, but why though? Why would you put this in the game? And it's clearly just to put in the trailer with the Eminem soundtrack, and it's like, oh my god. And of course, before we move on, we've got to just quickly mention our boy Ghost. Big F for Ghost. Yeah, which I have to admit, Ghost, for any of you guys who don't know, like Ghost is just this guy with a balaclava that's got like a skull print on it. But I remember, like, do you remember when he gets shot? He basically get betrayed in the game, and he gets shot in the head. And because people loved the design of the character so much, everyone was saying things like, "Oh, maybe he survived." Maybe the bullet just grazed the back of his head. It's like
Ghost.
Yeah, it's like, no, he got shot in the head and burned alive. I don't think he's going to survive, because he said the same thing about Gaz in the first game as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, nah, they're not coming back. Sadly, but yeah, which I suppose makes it a bit more harrowing.
I mean, there's a lot of characters to pour some out for in
Oh,
the Warfare series.
There really is. I mean, that is, I have to admit, that's one of the strengths of this trilogy, that it's got so many characters that you really feel attached to. Even ones that, like, you know, don't have, like, as much impact. Like they'll tag along with you and they'll say, like, a couple of one-liners. But when they die, you're kind of just like, oh, man. I'm actually really sad about that. I don't know about the third one, though. I'm going to be honest. Like, well, we move on to the third one.
Yeah, move on to the third game, yeah.
Yeah, because the third one just... I don't even know what analogy I can use here. It just goes balls to the wall crazy. And it's like... You know how we were saying, like, a couple of minutes ago that it was crazy that Russia could invade America? Yeah. Imagine invading, like, America, coming back home saying, okay, that didn't work, what are we going to do now? Okay, we're going to invade Europe? And it's like, which bit? Yes, the whole of Europe. And it's like, wait, what?
In one go.
Yeah, just in one go. It's like, they do real... do you know what I think it is? I think it's the developer got the scripts mixed up for Call of Duty and the game Risk. I feel as if somehow they both got mashed together and he was like, you know what? We're just going to run with it. We're just going to run with it. And again, like... It focuses, like the beginning of the game kind of focuses on I think it's the Rangers again, although I could be wrong.
It's the Rangers in 3.
Yeah, and yeah, it's like a particular task. I think it's Delta Force or Delta.
Oh, it's Delta
Squad,
yeah, sorry,
or something. Yeah, and they are like, you know, your Task Force 141 of this game, and they're basically, you begin by repelling the Russians, and then it flips all over the world again. So it's like you go to Paris, you go to Germany, you start off in America, of course, and you even go into London, which I will admit the set pieces in this game are really well done. I think that's one of its strengths. Its weaknesses, however, is the story, I would say. The story is by far very, very weak.
It's crazy. This game, you're right, is crazy in terms of its story, but it's also dull.
Yeah.
Like, Modern Warfare 2 is crazy, but at least it was fun. Like, the story actually felt fun and, you know, was exciting, and there was lots of, like, lots of it didn't make sense, but you're always like, oh my god, you know, like, more things were happening, like, you know, people are betraying you for very little reason, and, like, nukes are going off in space and everything, and it was a sense of, like, I can't say fun, you know, but that kind of idea, like, of exhilaration. The Modern 3's campaign just doesn't have that. And, like, I agree with you. Actually, I think in terms of level design and actual levels, 3 is maybe the best overall. I don't think there's any, like, out-and-out bad levels in this one. I think all the levels are actually pretty good, with some good set pieces, but the story is just dull. And, like, I think a big problem was, like, backstage, the development of this game before this game came out. So Infinity Ward were the company who developed the Modern Warfare games, and were actually the original developers of Call of Duty back from the very start. After Modern Warfare 2, the two founders and two heads of Infinity Ward got into legal problems with Activision, who were the publishers of Call of Duty, which ended up, so the two heads of Infinity Ward ended up leaving the company, taking a lot of people with them. So Infinity Ward kind of, like, were in a lot of turmoil trying to make this game, so Activision had to bring in other studios, including Sledgehammer Games, who then went on to make a couple of Call of Duty games themselves before they fell into turmoil recently. But so, like, this game does feel a little bit like it was patched together because you had different people working on different things, and it was like, oh god, we just need to find, you know, let's just have a crazy story, but very by the numbers, and just it doesn't really have, like, a unique IP. So, like, Call of Duty 4's campaign had that kind of realistic setting and a kind of grittiness to it. Yeah. While 2 was like a Michael Bay, like, balls to the wall, you know, crazy Hollywood action story. 3 just, I don't know, it's just dull. It's a real shame.
I think one of the main examples of that, and maybe this is just me getting old and my eyesight's not what it used to be, but I say that as I'm in my late 20s, I'm like, yes, back in my day. You know, but genuinely, I remember playing this on stream. Like, when I first started streaming, I played this. Like, I played through all of them. So I played through Modern Warfare 2, and then I played the third one. And I had a really difficult time telling who was who, like, in terms of enemies. Right? Yeah, like, everyone's just so dull. And don't get me wrong, like, obviously, you know, it's a war, and you gotta have a uniform of some kind. But, like, I don't know, like, I remember in the very first level when you're trying to shoot, like, you know, the Russian soldiers that are coming at you, and, like, I ended up by accident, like, shooting my own guys, and it's like, no friendly fire here, and it's like, how am I supposed to tell? Like, honestly, they were so similar in the heat of the moment, where you're just like, this is, like, I don't know, maybe if I replay it, like, my opinion will change, but I just remember playing that and thinking, everything's so dull, like, as I was saying, the level design's great, but that's about it. And I will admit, it is nice to see like London getting a shot, you know, of like like just a spotlight for once, rather than just being you know, like America or, you know, like just the regular places for this franchise. But I think as well, like on top of what you were saying there, like I think especially the kind of background disputes was something that definitely was one of the key points for this game, kind of not failing. I don't consider this game a failure, but I feel as if there was a lot of Call of Duty fatigue.
It didn't excel.
Yeah, because if you think about it, in 2007, Modern Warfare came out, and that was a massive, massive hit. Then you had World at War, which came out in 2008. And, you know, again, everybody loved it. Modern Warfare 2, next year, everyone loved it. Black Ops was the year after. It absolutely killed. But then by the time Modern Warfare 3 rolled around, everyone was just getting tired of Call of Duty. Like, it was that. It was like the FIFA of the FPS franchise. It was the same thing. It was, you know, like, no one really cared. And, you know, by the time Black Ops 2 came around the next year, everyone was like, I guess it's alright. But, you know, it was like, no one was really... I honestly, like, I remember people not being impressed whatsoever. They were all saying, oh, it's just a reskin of Modern Warfare 2, which I think to a degree it was.
It looks... The graphics are almost identical.
Yeah.
There's no real upgrade at all.
Yeah, like, I remember there was, like, a reveal for the multiplayer, and everybody was saying that. They were like, this is just Modern Warfare 2, why? Like, a lot of the HUDs and things, and, the, you know, like, the stuff they use is very samey. It is very samey. And, yeah, going back to what I was saying earlier about the controversy, it's just stupid, this one. I'm gonna admit, it's not one of the better ones, where essentially the reason, or not the reason, but the way that Russia decides to invade like Europe is because they've got like caches of like it's what even is it? It's like nerve gas or something. Yeah, just the gas. TM the gas. And yeah, they explode it in like different capital cities, which I'm kind of like, they do realise that there's other places in Europe. Like, Europe is a pretty big place. But, yeah, they blow up at all the capitals. I know, I get it, because that's where all the most, you know, important things, like, you know, the parliaments... But they don't even blow up near, like, government built, or they don't even say that, they just like blow it up in a random street. Because the way you find out is in the London level, which I do think is really cool. That's one of my highlights of the game, where you go through the London Underground to try and stop this chemical weapon from being set off. That's a cool level. But then you have the oh shit moment when you realise, oh no, it's not at the back of this truck. But then it cuts to this really weird scene of this father, you know, filming his daughter playing in the streets, and it's like, oh, spiffing day today, isn't it, my dear? Oh, don't run too fast. And you see in the background this guy in the overalls, like, running out this van, and you're like, oh no. Oh no. And then yeah, the van blows up, you know, and then it cuts to the next scene. Like, what did you think? Like, were you more shocked, or were you just like...
Oh no, I was just... By that point I was like, I know why this isn't here.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're going to have our quote-unquote shocking moment.
Yeah.
And this one felt like such a throwaway thing. You were like... It didn't have the impact of, like, the nuke. Because that was something so fresh, and like you're like, oh my god, like, you know, in the way it's presented, and it didn't have the shock value of no Russian. You know, it's just like, my god, like, you know, like, what am I being asked to participate in here? This is literally like, oh yeah, walk forward a couple paces, and then something shocking happens. Be shocked. It's like press forward to be shocked. And like, yeah, there's just nothing to it. I knew it was lazy. To be honest, it was lazy.
Sorry, when you said push forward to be shocked, I was like, oh, so just like Heavy Rain then.
Exactly. It's still Heavy Rain game design. Did it worse.
Yeah, David Cage is just writing down going, exploding children. Okay, I'll work that into a story somehow. But yeah, that aside, do you know what I just realised? In 2010, that's when Black Ops came out, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this game came out in 2011, and they literally used like a chemical weapon subplot in that, didn't they?
That's a good point.
Not for children, don't get me wrong. It was like, I feel as if they did that more shocking in Black Ops, because they actually show you the effects of it, and
Oh god, yeah.
with characters that you know you're used to. Like, I'm gonna put my cards down on the table. Like, Black Ops 1 is one of my favourites. Of like the whole Call of Duty series, and what they do in that game for some of the scenes is just incredible. But to go from that to be like, oh, hello, symbol of innocence, walk forward.
Yeah.
Oh, look, a van. I hope nothing bad comes out of that. And then,
to be martyred.
yeah, martyred for a Call of Duty story. My God, is it worth it? Probably not. Probably not. And yeah, it is just like a shocking moment, but at the same time, as you said, you kind of see it a mile off, and you're like, ugh. But then again, you do get another shocking moment where technically the protagonist of this series, or one of the protagonists, gets killed off because you get betrayed. That, of course, being Soap McTavish, who, you know, he's a fellow Scot, so props to him. But yeah, it's a shame how he goes out, because he just gets like shot, and then the game kind of just like meanders after that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does a bit. Like, I mean, he's got a couple more missions after that.
Yeah,
but yeah, like,
because I mean, like, there's a dramatic sacrifice of Delta Force, and they're like, we'll hold them back, and I'm just like, okay. I'm like, I just had no attachment to them whatsoever, which is weird because I had attachment to like Ghost, Gaz, you know. Oh, who was the other guy? I can't remember the other one, and the other American guy, and
Griggs.
Griggs, that's the one. Thank you.
But these are people with personality. Like, these are people who you spent the whole game with, but who had personality and had good banter, you know, and like maybe as well, like with 4, the story's more rooted in a realism, so these feel like more maybe realistic characters. Well, with like the Delta Force guys in the last one, like in 3, like they're just kind of, they feel like stock characters. They feel like stock military, like, you know, macho American soldiers. Like, you know, there's not really that much more to them. And even like, so you play as a character of the Delta Force, but like that character, when they make the heroic sacrifice, that character's not there. So your player character just disappears, and there's no reason for why they're not there for that like penultimate mission. But it's just like, so I don't know, it's just like, oh, you know, oh no, these stock characters are sacrificing themselves. That feels like their natural endpoint, you know. I don't really feel like I'm like, it's not like where Gaz is like shot in the head by Zakhaev at the end, like, you know, when he's like bleeding out and stuff, and you're like, oh god, like holy shit, you know. But these guys are just like, oh yeah, this is of course this is going to be their endpoint. What other endpoint do they have?
Do you know? I mean, it's true, but it's like, do you know what I think makes it less dramatic? I'm kind of thinking about like the ones we've been talking about. It's like Griggs and Gaz, they get shot in the face. You know, see, while you're lying there helpless, like on a bridge without a weapon, you're outgunned, you're outmanned, you know, you are just about to get like picked off easy. With Modern Warfare 2, the exact same thing happens. You get shot by Shepard, you know, and you're just lying, bleeding out. You're already injured, but you're lying, bleeding out as you watch, you know, Ghost get shot in the head. And even, okay, I'll extend it to even when you're watching Soap try to get, you know, like Price tries to resurrect, or not resurrect, but, you know, he tries to save him, and he can't. And yeah, he can. You know, it's like you feel helpless as well, because you're watching and you're expecting a prompt like the F to pay respect, like F to triage, you know. It's like you can't do anything, and that's what makes it so emotional, because you are at the forefront of that. With Delta Force, you're just like watching from a distance, and then they get killed behind a smoke screen.
Yeah.
Well, you don't even see them. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like some weirdo being like, you have to see the bodies. But, you know, it's like, there's just no, as you said, it's generic characters getting killed off screen. There's no, I mean, don't get me wrong, if there's any like fans out there of Delta Force, please let me know, because I would be I'd be very interested.
Find something else to be a fan of. Find something better. Find some better characters to be a fan of, first of all.
Like Final Fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. Or anybody else in the Call of Duty series.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, anybody. Literally.
I'll tell you, here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think Delta Force have the worst deaths, so worst quote-unquote heroic deaths out of any of the characters in a Call of Duty game?
Probably. I mean, technically Yuri gets, like, he does not get like a great death.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets shot by Makarov, so maybe.
The one I can think of is, do you
I was-
remember like in like the final mission of Infinite Warfare? Like
Oh,
there's
yeah.
one bit where one of your crew members, like, you're opening a door,
Mm-hmm.
and one of your crew members all of a sudden jumps in front of the door and pushes you out of the way so they can get
Yeah.
shot. That one made me laugh so much because I was like, that's such a needless death. Like, I'm pretty sure my character would have been fine.
Yeah.
But he just like leaps in front of the door. That's the only other one I could think of being like a worse one,
Like
a
in
more
terms,
hysterical one.
like in terms of overall Call of Duty.
Oh yeah, sorry,
Oh,
in
sorry,
terms
yeah.
of like overall, I think they're the worst in the Modern Warfare series by far.
Oh yeah, by far. I'm just trying to think who else there is, because I mean maybe Reznov, but technically, yeah, there's a whole bag of there's a whole bag of worms behind that death. That's for sure. Probably everybody in like Black Ops 3, maybe. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
I can't remember a lot of their deaths, I have to admit, so
yeah.
that's probably very telling.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's one person who gets killed by Nova 6, and you're supposed to feel bad, but you're kind of like,
Oh yeah.
you're like, was there literally no other way to resolve this? Can we not brainstorm? Oh, you're in. Okay. In fact, well, no. Remember Advanced Warfare?
Yeah.
there was a lot of like cheap deaths in that.
That's another one, see, I struggle to remember.
Yeah, same.
I remember the final death.
Oh,
because
yeah.
it's very much like
You chop off your arm.
action movie one. Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently there was like an alternate ending, which I know we'll probably cover that in another Satsunami, but yeah, there was like an alternate ending where I think he survived, maybe, but thank God, because, yeah.
That would have been awkward if they decided
Yeah.
to make more of those games, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I think I saw a comment the other day on, it was either Facebook or something, and they were like, man, I wish, I wish they made an Advanced Warfare 2, and it was like, really? In fact, I think it was like an IGN article or GameSpot or one of these like people who were like, "Oh yeah, I think that this game needs a sequel," and it's like, no, it doesn't. No, just crawl back into your office and think of a better headline. It's like, get away with this clickbait nonsense. It's like, this is why Delta Force are the best characters. It's like, right,
Now you're just trying to rile me up now.
now you're just. Speaking of riled up, though. In fact, sorry, before we go on to the final game that we're going to talk about, quick question. What would you say is the best game out of this original trilogy?
Oh, hands down for me, like the original one is. I think the original one is still one of the best first-person shooter games ever made, and just the way it like. I remember all the way back when we were talking about the Black Ops series, I talked about the original Black Ops as not being quite a revolutionary game, but a very important like game. But like, I think Call of Duty 4 is revolutionary. If you look at like the way the first-person shooter landscape changed after this game, in terms of bringing more of these games into a modern setting, that like so many games jumped on that bandwagon afterwards, but also like giving stories a more realistic edge. Going for moments where you like the AC-130 gunship mission or like Old Gilly Duck, but going for those kind of standout levels. But it's multiplayer as well. I know we don't talk much about the multiplayer, but Call of Duty 4 brought in a lot of things like experience points and kill streaks, perks, think progression things that became staples of the Call of Duty like multiplayer series and a lot of other multiplayer games. So I honestly think it was like a revolutionary game, and it's one of the games that made Call of Duty such a giant franchise. Like, it already was a popular franchise before. But this one has sold over 17 million copies like in its lifetime, and like it propelled this game like to new heights. So for me, it's this one. Like, I think it's still the best Call of Duty game, and I don't think they'll ever be able to top it, to be honest.
I think that although I have a soft spot for Modern Warfare 2, I do enjoy it because that was kind of my first entry into this series. But like, in terms of the Modern Warfare series, this was my first like exposure to it, and I love it. But going back to Modern Warfare, although I would maintain that some of the things are a bit janky, not everything. Like, I do think it does really well in other aspects, as you said, especially the story, but just the fact of how mature it could be, and how it could actually tell people that, yes, this is, at the end of the day, it's a FPS game that is... It's still a game at the end of the day, but it can also take like a mature stance on a lot of things. It can show like, developers and just the general, population of gamers, this is a game that can take itself seriously and can tell like a gripping story without having to... I mean, there are some gimmicks, but at the end of the day, like, it did it at the time really well. And then the next game was just like, lol, let's get Russia invading the White House, and it's like, oh, okay. Okay. Okay, we're jumping on that bandwagon, okay. But no, I think, as you said, it was definitely a trendsetter of its time. I do agree. It is by far one of the best, it's like one of the best beginnings, I would say, for just the landscape, really.
Oh, yeah.
Of just general FPSs, because I know obviously themed based ones like Halo, that's obviously not going to go to the modern setting, but it was a good game for its time, and I do agree that it was a positive step forward. But yeah, it's just a shame it kind of regressed, even though the gameplay, I will admit, the gameplay kind of is just, very similar throughout the series. But yeah, I feel as if it's a strong start. And is this not the first game? This is going to be really petty, but is this not the first game you can sprint in Call of Duty? Or
it's the first main title you can sprint. You could there was an expansion pack to the original Call of Duty that added a brief sprint function, but it was pretty useless, to be honest. This is the first one that kind of made a well integrated sprint function.
But there you go, you have it here first. This is a Satsunami exclusive, even though the game came out in 2007. First sprint game. And can I also say, I'm just going to quickly, before we go into our final game that we're going to talk about, can I just say, Mile High Club, whatever, I doubt anybody from, the original team is listening to this, but if you are, if by some cosmic coincidence you do listen to this, you are a sadist. You are the designer for this level. You're an absolute sadist, and how do you sleep at night knowing that you created such a hellish level? You want to know the reason why I hate it? Because I did indeed complete this level on Veteran.
Nice.
Once, and that was at uni after hundreds and hundreds of attempts, because I was a bit of a perfectionist where I'm oh, maybe I could get all of the achievements. Yeah, that was the only one I had left. Man, it was hellish. It was horrible. Mile High Club is just... Have you ever done that
I'm ashamed to say my great shame is that I've never completed it on Veteran. Despite numerous attempts, I just had to give up. It was... either the game was going to break or I was going to break, and I'm ashamed to say I broke first. I couldn't defeat it. I got so close. I got so close one time, and then an enemy got in my way. He didn't even kill me. He didn't even have the good-heartedness to kill me. He just stood in my way, so I couldn't get past him. So the timer ran out. That was the point where I was like, you know what, F this. Yeah. Before I throw my 360 out the window.
Do you know what the worst part of it is? See, once you get to the very end of that level, you have to shoot the guy. So, just to explain to people, because I don't think we've actually described what this level is.
It's a good point, actually.
So basically, at the very end of Modern Warfare, you end up... It's just like a bonus level, really, isn't it? That you have to storm this plane that has been taken over by just generic terrorists, I think. And you have to you have to work your way through the different corridors. You have to work your way up, and then at the very end you have to kill this guy who's holding a hostage, and then you basically jump out the plane, and that's it, happy days. But as I said before, the veteran mode in this is hellish. It is so difficult, and you have to weave in and out. You have to throw flashbangs to stop them from shooting you and things. You have to be very precise, because if you mess up one action, that's it. You've pretty much failed, which I did a couple of times, and yeah, a lot of screaming that night. A lot of oh, and then just lying on the ground thinking, what was it all for? It's such a difficult
Why
level.
Are we here?
Yeah, just as ever. And as I said, I've done it once, and never again. If anybody wants proof of it, feel free to message me, feel free to let me know. I will happily take a picture of that achievement and send it to your DMs. You know what, see if I ever make a dating profile, I think I'm just going to put that as my profile picture, just it's hey there, I got this achievement. It's what the hell's that? And I'll just
you're
cry.
Not the woman for me.
Yeah, it's just swipe right, or is it left? I don't know. I don't use
Swipe
it.
some direction.
Swipe some down. Swipe up. Why not? Or down. I don't know. Anyway, I'm getting far off track. But yeah, hellish level. So yeah, speaking of hellish levels, yeah, we have one more game that we have yet to cover. That, of course, being the 2019. Would we say soft reboot?
It's a soft reboot.
Soft reboot, yeah, of the entire Modern Warfare franchise.
Yeah.
Which I'm a bit salty nowadays about it, because it's getting overshadowed by for obvious reasons, it's getting overshadowed by the new Cold War game, but it's also getting overshadowed by Warzone as well.
Yeah.
Which I think that's a whole rant in itself. Like, I feel as if Modern Warfare, the new one, is like a hell of a lot better than some of the new. That's my hot take of the night, or lukewarm take, as we say. The only reason I think I got it was because, like, I never got it in release. So sorry, like, backtracking a little bit. Between 2011 was the last Call of Duty Modern Warfare game, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then we didn't get another Modern Warfare game until 2019.
Yeah.
And that is a long wait. That is
It's a long stretch.
Like, do you want to describe what this one's about?
Right, let's see if I can do a better job
Like, because this is a bit different.
This game is this game is an attempt. And I'm maybe going to give it better like motives than I actually had, but an attempt to look at examine real world issues in the context of a Call of Duty game.
Yeah.
So it's got a contemporary, and this one is actually set. So the game was released 2019, and the game actually takes place in 2019, and it deals with things like terrorist attacks. There's a group that is basically might as well be ISIS, to be honest. It kind of looks at like it kind of I say borrows from I'm like saying like it borrows from, but like takes examples from the civil war in Syria, but also like examples from the Soviet-Afghan War of the 80s. So it's an attempt to look at kind of historical and real-world events and to create a mature, quote-unquote, realistic experience around those events. Yeah, I don't know if that was a good description, but... No,
absolutely. Better than what I could have described it, because it's one of those games that... I mean, it looks beautiful, don't get me wrong. Like, the graphics in this are... And usually, like, I don't mind about the graphics. Like, it's not... it doesn't make a game perfect, but... I mean, this game looks beautiful. Like, I remember the first time playing this being like, oh my god. Because I think the first time I played it was... This is before the lockdown times. You came over to my place and... you brought over the copy and you're just like, oh, let's play through it. And I played the first mission and I was just like, oh my god, this is gorgeous looking. Like, you honestly felt as if you were there, whereas kind of when you play it, you get desensitized to it and you're like, oh, okay, here's another Call of Duty game. But honestly, it looks great, it does look good, and it's got a lot of really interesting mission types and things, but I don't know if it still suffers from trying to be too controversial, which, as you said, like... Maybe this is a bit of a hard-hitting topic, but, like, it does, as you said, it borrows from a lot of real-life events. Like, do you want to... Will we talk about, like, the controversies of this game?
I think I think they're really important to the topic.
Yeah,
I think we should just
absolutely. So, you've got Basically, this game was not well received in Russia. The reason being... Because, again, the main enemies in the game are the Russians. Yeah, surprise, surprise. It's a Call of Duty game, surprise. This isn't Homefront, this is Call of Duty. For this game, basically they invade, like, another generic country, don't they? Like, they give it a fake name and everything. It's clear where, like, as you said, it's kind of loosely based on, like, the Syrian conflict. Because you see, like, the white helmets and things, like... rummaging through the rubble and things, and you can definitely tell, like, there's a lot of influence from that. But there's a particular scene where they're painting the Russians as the bad guys, because they're like, oh, these guys are, terrible. And there's one scene where you are on what's called the Highway of Death, and basically they say, oh, it was the Russians who bombed a convoy of, like, civilians trying to flee the war zone. Now, in real life... It wasn't the Russians. It was Was it the Americans?
It was the Americans during the Gulf War, during the first Gulf War in the 90s, who bombed. Like as the Iraqi army was fleeing Kuwait, in a lot of civilian vehicles, the American Air Force bombed the crap out of them, to use the technical term. Yeah.
And obviously the Russians were pretty much a little bit peeved about being blamed for a war crime that they indeed didn't commit. Yeah, and I mean, between that and the whole, like, again, they return to the chemical weapon thing, which I know is, like, a really kind of blasé, like, way to describe it, to be like, oh, the chemical weapon. But, yeah, they just kind of return to that, don't they, as a plot device? Because let's face it, it is a plot device in this game.
It is.
And they do like try to, they try to shock you at the beginning by having a suicide bomber in the middle of like Piccadilly, where of course, they place like a woman and her child beside them. They place, the elderly man in the background and things. They might as well have thrown a puppy in just for good measure. That was the quote unquote shocking scene. I think that there were, well, the second. I think unintentionally, the Highway of Death became like the most controversial. But I mean, before that, that was probably the most controversial scene.
There's also the bit where you play as a child.
Oh yeah,
that level was very controversial, especially one part of it.
Yeah, what's that? Where you have to crawl through like a sea of dead children bodies.
Well, there's that as well, but there's also the quote unquote boss fight in that one, where the stereotypical Russian soldier comes into your house and kills your father, and then you have to you're playing as like an 8-year-old child. You might be younger than that, and you have to crawl around and find scissors and knives and everything to stab him with. And it's a very, I think the biggest problem with this game is that I don't think this is just my opinion, but I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with trying to explore, more mature themes and look at kind of world events, that are nasty and, are, horrible to look at. I don't think there's anything wrong with exploring those. The problem with this game is it very much, I don't even know if this is a word, but it gamifies those experiences. So it, especially for me, the worst thing is that when you play that level where you play as the child, because it takes an experience that is you can only imagine how traumatizing and soul destroying and shocking that is for a young child, and it gamifies it by making put you into a boss fight where you have all these it's video game mechanics of hide and creep up behind them and stab them and everything, and just
and crawl through the convenient hole that's
it's all
the
that
hall and
it just gamifies these experiences so much that that you're taking them out of their real world context and you're not exploring them. They're they're set pieces, their background, their set dressing. At the end of the day for your game, and that is a problem. I think that is a real problem with this game, and it it's
I mean, especially later on in that scene, because this is something I was kind of telling you as well, that my immersion was severely broken throughout this game, partly because of the bad AI, but I will get onto that because I do have a genuine gripe with it. But I mean, even after that scene where you manage to kill the Russian soldier, who I am convinced, I could be wrong, but I am sure he is one of the operators that you can play as online. Yeah. And it's oh great. Oh great, I can play as a guy who, killed some guys, children's fathers in front of them. It's oh great, I can play as that guy. It's who in their right mind is saying, oh yeah, he's my favourite character? It's no. What?
We identify with his motivations.
Yeah, exactly. It's all a little bit too generic, which I know it's a Call of Duty game and everything. I'm not expecting, again, Citizen Kane, that's the one I usually go for. I'm not expecting Shakespeare, but at the same time, it's if you're gonna go at these very serious topics, which, especially at the time, in fact, even nowadays, it is a very, very important, or rather, it's very important that you handle these topics with such great care, because if you mess it up, then well, you're going to get two guys from Scotland ranting about it. But I think one of the things that annoyed me as well is, see when you crawl through, so basically what happens is you run into the house and the Russians let off this gas to basically kill everyone around. So you get a gas mask, you crawl through the streets, and there's a scene where you basically crawl in and you see the dead body of a child, which is indeed is unpleasant, of course. It is horrible and everything, but I remember looking down at the model for this child, and his leg was literally clipping through one of the tables and things, and it's just why? I don't know, it feels as if it was just trying to shock for the sake of shocking, and the villains are just, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying oh, this would never happen in real life, because maybe obviously I don't know firsthand, but one of the scenes I do remember is the butcher scene, which other than this scene it's a very good level, but it's the one where you go to the embassy. Do you remember that scene? And basically, the game punishes you if you try to save this child, which I get what they're trying to go for. You know, it's the whole, you have to, you know, try and think rationally instead of emotionally and all of that, but at the same time, the like body count of children in this game is just really uncomfortably high. Which I know we're having a laugh earlier, being like, "Oh, silly," you know, but like genuinely, it's almost as if like they go out the way to be like, "Oh, look how evil these guys are." And don't get me wrong, you know, the game has to have a villain and everything, but does it like? I mean, what do you think? Do you think they went too far in this one? Because I know there is one level that technically does a good job, but it did annoy me a little bit, called Clean House.
Oh yeah.
Which is a fantastic level. It's basically you play as an SAS. It's the SAS, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to like go through this house that are full of like these insurgents, and you have to like choose who to pick off. You know, there's civilians in there as well, non-combatants. You have to be very careful. And I thought that was great. It was like praised at the time. One of the scenes I really don't like and I felt uncomfortable with, and I know that's the point, but there's a scene when you go in and there's this woman who runs to a cot, and I have to admit, everyone was like, "Oh, I was about to shoot her." I never once like thought to, you know, shoot this woman, because she goes into the cot and it's supposed to be that, oh, she's reaching for a gun, but it turns out she's reaching for a baby. Now, if you're sick enough and you decide to shoot, and this isn't me speaking from experience, like this is all of the news articles accumulated, if you look at that, like, and you actually shoot the child, then the game actually scolds you for it. And if you do it too many times, then it kicks you out of the game. Apparently it physically, which is not something I want to test, you know, that way, but it's like, I just look up a YouTube video or something. Like, I'm not going into this game for the sole purpose of like doing that. But I don't know, do you feel as if this, in fact, I've got two questions for you. Do you think this is the most controversial out the Modern Warfare series? And do you think it went too far?
Ooh.
Because I know it's a bit of a loaded question after all of that. Sorry.
It's interesting to say, is this the most... I think as an overall game, I think this was the most controversial. I don't know if it reached the levels of No Russian, because maybe it's just because I was so close to the No Russian controversy at the time. Mm-hmm. I can remember that vividly.
Yeah.
Like, I think as a game, this is definitely the most controversial one, because at least No Russian was a moment. You know, it's one level. Like, this game is kind of seeped in quite a few controversial moments, as we've talked about. What they were trying to do, clearly what they were trying to do with this game is they were trying to, like, tell a morally grey story, you know, with complicated characters. And, you know, like, it's supposed to be it's trying to show that, like, a war like this, and a regular war like this, they're, like, the decisions you have to make, and you have to weigh up, like, you know, the greater good against the immediate good, and, like, you know, like, good people have to make terrible decisions ultimately for the greater good, and it's trying to tell a story like that. I don't think it quite succeeds in what it's setting out to be, because it's still too attached to being a Call of Duty game and like an action shooting game, basically. So it's stuck in that confines, and those two ideas don't mesh very well most of the time. I think it went too far again. And for me, it's not so much the subject matter that they chose to tackle. It's how they chose to tackle it by really gamifying it is where I think they went too far, if that makes sense, in that I feel like the game doesn't really have anything to say about it. It's just like, oh, here's a like a unique thing for you to do. You know, here's like a unique boss fight for you, and here's, like, you know, the game throughout has this sort of like moral grading system where it grades the actions you take. It doesn't really amount. The only problem, it doesn't really amount to anything. Like, you can check your score, like, you know, on like the level select screen, but it doesn't really give you anything. There's no real incentive to, like, you know, try and do good at it. You know, it doesn't really offer you anything, and so it just feels like a kind of tacked on thing. And I don't feel like I'm learning anything about, like, or, you know, getting an idea of these complex issues. I just feel like I'm like, oh, you're awkwardly trying to shove gameplay into this. It's
definitely a fine balance, because I'm thinking of other games that have tried it, like, let's say, like Spec Ops: The Line, you know, where they tried to do, like, quite a serious story amongst trying to, you know, gamify it, but, like, in terms of that, there are moments where they do succeed.
Oh yeah,
and like the subject matter. Same with like the other Modern Warfares, like especially the first one. Like, when shit hits the fan, or even go back to No Russian, as you said, that is just like, the whole story's just like a bombastic tale going from set piece to set piece. But when you go to No Russian, that is the only example of that.
Yeah.
And I do see what you mean. It's like, that's the only controversial thing that you're probably going to do in the game. Whereas in the rest of it, it's very much, yeah, it focuses on like hunting down Makarov and things. But in, as you said, in the reboot, it feels as if it's more they're trying to be controversial throughout. Like, again, it begins with suicide bombers, and then it goes into, you know, a country taken over by the Russians, you know, through aggression. Then it goes into you becoming a child killer. And there's also another scene, going back to what you were saying about just basically the idea of like no consequence for your actions. So there's a scene when you play as the head of basically a like resistance cell against the Russians, and I can't remember who the main guy is. He's just very generic.
General Barkov.
Barkov, yeah. He's got his posters. See, this is one thing that annoyed me. He's got posters everywhere, and they're like all in English. And don't get me wrong, like I get why, because, you know, it's like it's the English audience and everything, but, you know, maybe you could say like, oh, it's because your character understands it or something, but yeah, that's like, yeah, so Russians invade I can't remember what language you speak, if it's Farsi or it's like Arabic or...
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say...
I wouldn't say first. Yeah, it's like one of them anyway, but yeah, they speak in that, you know, so it's like, it's not that, it's not Russian, it's all in English, and it's like, my god, it's great for the spies and tourists coming through this country being like, oh, so that's what that sign says. Yes. And yeah, there's a scene where she gets, like, this leader of the cell gets captured, and she gets, like, waterboarded, she gets beaten, she gets chained up, she sees, like, her friends, like, with their head shaven, and of course their headscarves are taken off. You know, it's like, it's very, like, I don't want to be too thingy and say, oh, it's, you know, I get what they're trying to do, but maybe that was a bit too far, because it's like, obviously it's meant to shock you and be like, look how bad war is, but at the same time, there's no real consequence from it. Like, this whole, like, sequence, by the way, is a flashback. It's not even part of the main story, really. It's like a flashback to how, I think it's is it Farah, her name is?
Right, yeah.
Like how she met Captain Price and everything. She basically escapes the cell and she goes out with her, what she calls her sisters, you know, like these other female freedom fighters, and they go and they break out, and it begins. So I think my main problem is it begins with like the torture and everything and that, and then it moves on to, oh, shoot the Russians, escape, haha. And again, it's going back to this idea of gamifying. And again, like, it has to be a game. You know, it's Call of Duty. It's, at the end of the day, it's a game. But I don't know. I feel as if in some places they just went, this is going to sound like completely, you know, like off topic, but have you ever seen that clip of George Lucas watching The Phantom Menace for the first time?
No, I haven't.
So there's a behind the scenes thing where he's watching The Phantom Menace, and they've just finished watching like the cut for the first time, and they've realised that they've completely messed up the film, but there's no going back. They can't like redo it or anything. And he turns around and he says in a very hushed voice, he goes, I think we went too far in a few places. And I feel as if in this game, like, everyone around him is just like, they've got their heads in their hands and they're like, oh my god, like, just what are we going to do? I feel as if for this game, that's kind of how I feel. It's like, yeah, they've definitely gone too far in a few places. I get them trying to take it in a different direction, but like, overall, would you say this campaign, like, would you say this kind of lives up to the reputation, or do you think it's just them trying to be too edgy? Or not edgy, that is completely the wrong word, but you know what I mean, like, too
I think
dark
there is
and
an
gritty.
extent of them. Yeah. Like, I think the problem with this game, one of the problems at its heart is that it is a soft reboot.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they feel like the designers obviously felt they had to work within the framework of the original Modern Warfare trilogy. So obviously they're bringing back characters who they're slightly different, but they're still kind of roughly the same characters that we've known before.
Yeah.
Similar organizations and things. But obviously they felt like, well, the Russians were the main bad guys of the Modern Warfare trilogy, so we have to have them in there.
Yeah.
But for this game, there was no need for the Russians to be the main bad guys. Like you could have easily replaced them. So it takes place, the majority of it, in this fictional country we talked about, which is basically an analogy for Syria. So why didn't they just make like random dictator of this country, with his private army and everything? Like you could have easily put them in, and the game would be identical, basically, and then if you want to do more of the Syria analogy, then it makes sense. Okay, fine, maybe the Russians are like doing things behind the scenes like the Americans in the West are, as is what's happening in Syria now. So that makes far more sense. But they obviously felt that they had to stick there, like, well, we have to have the Russians because that's what people expect from the Modern Warfare, And it's that way of like, this is the worst way of including, I think. Like the original Modern Warfare probably isn't still great depiction of the Russians, but at the very least in Call of Duty 4, like Russia, like in the game story, Russia was in a state of civil war, and it's fighting, and the people your people who are the bad guys are the ultranationalists, who are a bad group, and you fight alongside what they call the loyalist Russians. So there were portrayals of good Russians there, and you were like, it's like taking a side in the civil war, which is slightly different. With this one, the only Russians, with this one Russian you meet who's a good Russian, or maybe there's a couple more, but like the majority of the Russians you meet are like horrifically bad stereotypes, like murdering civilians and like just horrible, like no humanity at all. And then but like we get references to being like, oh, this is a rogue army doing its own thing down here and everything, and like it doesn't represent Russia. But it's not that way of showing like, because the only representation we're seeing are these like horrific, these horrific examples of Russians. And it only not only does it make them look horrible, but then it makes the other Russians look incompetent because they're like, oh, well, this rogue army is just getting away and doing all this stuff, and nobody's holding it accountable.
Yeah,
So I don't know. For me, it's such a negative portrayal, and like there's no other side to it really, and I just don't. There's no reason for the Russians to have been the bad guys in this game, but that goes back to it being a soft reboot, and that they felt they obviously had to work within this context and this framework. To the detriment, because I think the story has some interesting themes and ideas in there. I think they did push it too far in trying to be gritty and mature, but I kind of like the overall tone they were going for, and I think there are some interesting things to say about conflicts in our day, kind of irregular warfare and what it takes to fight it, and like this like there's always like always blurring grey lines and more, but it feels like especially now in the conflicts that like the West are having to fight. And so there's interesting things there, and it kind of touches them, but it doesn't, again, it just can't break out of being a Call of Duty game. And maybe that's asking too much from like a giant franchise now that's established itself, like to try and take a bit more of a risky like approach. So I don't know, like I'm conflicted about it because there's a lot of things I like in the game, but there's a lot of things that I don't know, like you can't overlook and are very uncomfortable.
I have to admit, I'm thinking like, so when we were talking about the original trilogy, we were talking about the single player mainly, and we kind of briefly touched on the multiplayer. See, for this one, I feel as if this is the biggest disconnect between like a single player and multiplayer. And what I mean by that is the single player, as we just established, is a very dark, gritty, very serious like morality or exploration into morality and warfare. The multiplayer is a candy-coloured Fortnite fest where you've got like guns shooting like lasers, and or maybe not lasers, but there is one gun that shoots like electricity, which I'm still pissed off at. It's like you've got all the pink guns and all the tracer red. The tracer reds aren't that bad, I have to say, but like you know what I mean though. Like you can go from, and again, I know that's the moneymaker, and they've been doing that for a while. They've probably been doing that since like Black Ops era, so I can't say like, oh, this was the first game that did it, because it wasn't. But yeah, it's kind of a funny thing to note where you're like, oh yeah, war is hell, and you bring out like your minigun that's got like clown noses on the barrels. You're like, yeah, honk the horn for a for a war crime. It's like, oh no, this is not This is not good at all.
I think this was the game as well that included white phosphorus as a
is.
reward thing, which is white phosphorus is a weapon
Yeah.
that's banned under the Geneva Convention,
Oh,
I think,
God.
for its use. But this game has it as like a reward thing. You can have a reward strike for it.
I mean,
Games have explored that. Spec Ops: The Line has an absolutely incredible scene involving white phosphorus, where like it starts off as one of these like classic, like kind of like the AC-130 mission in Call of Duty 4, where you're like on this like mortar and you're firing this white phosphorus to clear this enemy encampment, and it's like that classic thing. But then the game makes you walk through the encampment that you've just destroyed, and like the carnage that is there, and the people who've burnt and like lost limbs and are screaming, and it just brings you completely back down to earth. And oh my god, like it's like the effect of these weapons that you don't see in most games. You know, while here in Call of Duty, it's a reward. It's like, oh, you did really well at killing people. Here's your white phosphorus. Go crazy.
yeah. I mean, technically, like, it's not the same because, like, I'm assuming white phosphorus is probably a lot easier for an army to get than, like, a nuclear weapon to use. The reason I'm saying that is because of, like, Modern Warfare 2's streak.
Oh, well,
where if you got like 25 kills, you could get like a nuke to drop. But once you dropped that, like the game ended. Like it wasn't a case of rinse and repeat. You know, you couldn't like say, "Oh yeah, I've got the nuke, I've dropped it. Now let's drop another one." It's like, no. That's it. That's your one shot. Whereas, which was pretty OP, but compared to being able to use that over and over again, and as well, like you walk through it and your character like coughs as well. Have you noticed that?
Oh yeah,
and things like that. But I mean, don't get me wrong. Like yeah, it is a bit of a like touchy point, but I mean at the same time, like that aside, the multiplayer just feels like just any other COD, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean it's very much a formula now.
Yeah, I mean it's fun enough. It's like it's competent and everything, but it's just what COD's really become now. And I'm not saying that in like a kind of like looking down on it, being that's what COD's become. But it's like, as you said, it's that formula, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just that this is what COD is now, and especially what I find quite interesting is they're really starting to push away Modern Warfare. Have you noticed this?
Yeah.
So, like, if you download Modern Warfare just now, other than the horrific download sizes, which they are terrible, but other than that, instead of so it used to be Captain Price, who was like one of the leading characters in this. And sorry, before I go on, could I just say there was an amazing like pre-order bonus on Amazon where if you bought the game, you could also buy it with like these boxes of Doritos with like XP codes in them.
Love it.
And you could also get like a free exclusive Captain Price model, but it was something at a Kinder Egg. It was like, it wasn't detailed, it was all like smear. Oh, it was horrible. It's like that, and this is to any 40k fans out there, but have you seen the Thin Your Paints video? Where
No.
it's like, it's just basically like showing like all these models that have like really thick paint on them. And it's just like, you see them all screaming, going, oh! And that's what it feels like. It's like when you look at this model, you're like, that is just pathetic. Where was I actually going with that? Oh yeah, with Captain Price, they have basically taken him off the thumbnail for the, like, when you're opening it up, especially in the Xbox. I don't know if it's the same for PlayStation, but now it's just Warzone that's covering it because Warzone's their cash cow now, and it's a bit depressing, but it's like Warzone, and even for Black Ops Cold War, they've gotten rid of the thumbnail, and now it's just Warzone. So that seems to be the way forward.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a shame. But on a more positive point, like to kind of wrap up, what would you see if it's... Well, two questions. Would you like to see like a sequel for the reboot? And if so, what do you want to see from this series going forward?
I would like to see at least another one. Because as well, like they ended this game's campaign on a cliffhanger. You know, it's like the end of this game is that they're reinstating Task Force 141, and like people like Soap and Ghost, and yeah, so they're coming back into it. They were not in the series as well. Like they mentioned, General Shepard as well is name dropped. So I would like to see, because it ends on and I know like Warzone seems to have continued the story partially, so I'm hoping that's not going to be the way of it in the future. But I would like to see one more. Part of me almost wants to see them go down the route that Modern Warfare 2 went down and just make it a more Michael Bay-esque action thing. Because as much as I like games that like do try and tackle more sort of like mature subject matter, I'm just not sure a Call of Duty game and the way it's set up is the format to do it in. You know, there are other games out there that can have a bit more freedom to explore these issues in a more like nuanced way. I don't know if a Call of Duty game is the format to explore these issues. So if they can do it well, then I would encourage them to stick with the kind of more mature, grittier theme. But like, part of me just kind of hopes that they go down a more sort of Hollywood action, kind of way. So but I would like to see another one at least.
It's kind of weird looking at where the franchise is now compared to where it was in 2007.
Yeah,
because it feels as if maybe it's just because they were starting out, so they wanted to kind of like not take a step back, but try and make it more realistic in the kind of scope of the game. Because if you look at it, as I said before, in Modern Warfare 1, they like make references to the Geneva Convention, and if you bomb a church or anything, then it just immediately fails you. Because it tells you right off the bat. It says like any, like buildings that are protected under the convention, you don't touch it, don't do this, don't do that, like it's got like a set. It's like, when you're watching a film or something and it like lays out the ground rules for the world that you're about to step in. It's a bit like that, where it's like, okay, this is what we're going to do here, this is what we're going to do there, that's the line. Whereas then you get to Modern Warfare 3 and they blow up the Eiffel Tower, which, not that I love the Eiffel Tower, but it's, at the same time, I'm just like, why?
Deserved better.
Yeah. It feels like it was just done for the sake of it being done. You know what I mean? It's like it wasn't done. I mean, I know why it was like a tactical thing, but so they said in the game. Damn Delta Force. It's like next they'll go to London and strike down Big Ben. It's like, they're maniacs.
You monsters!
You murder!
Stop them, somebody!
Yeah, just monument vandals. Like J. Jonah Jameson. Just they're criminals. I want pictures of Delta Force. Oh, but yeah, it did go crazy. But it feels as if it's weird how it went from crazy to like a John Clancy novel. Like, it seems like one of those cases of one of these things isn't like the other. But I mean, with 8 years in between it's definitely interesting how it's like evolved. But yeah, I would like to see as well how they go forward with it. But yeah, the only time will tell, I suppose. Like, because I don't know what the next. In fact, I think it was you that was telling me that there's not going to be a game next year.
Seems like there's not going to be one this year.
This year, sorry.
It was meant to be Sledge, so they do a 3 studio rotation. Well, they were doing a 3 studio rotation for Call of Duty. So Infinity Ward would do one, then Treyarch, and then Sledgehammer were in there. But it seems Sledgehammer have kind of imploded, and this was supposed to be their game this year. But yeah, they seem to have imploded, and it looks like they're being scrapped out of the rotation. So it's back down to just 2, Infinity Ward and Treyarch. So I guess like it would be Infinity Ward then. They would have to do one this year. Yeah. But I don't know like whether like they've just decided like we we can't scale up in that amount of time. So we might just get more Warzone stuff. Is what I'd presume. Maybe not. I mean, maybe they'll get something out.
I'm honestly really surprised considering the rush job that Black Ops was.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we kind of. Well, I'm saying we to kind of deflect the blame off myself. Feel like we complained about it, but yeah, it wasn't the best one. Like, it had the good moments and everything. And again, if you want to see like our full or hear about our full like opinions, then feel free to like go back and listen to our Black Ops retrospective. But yeah, there was a lot of moments in that just felt really rushed. So yeah, I can understand why they might be a bit hesitant, to like bring one out, which is a bit weird because I know they like money. So I'm surprised they're not like rushing another game out. But
it's impressive. It's really funny though, because if they don't release a game this year, this will be the first time since 2005 that we haven't had the first year since 2004 that like a main series Call of Duty game has been released.
Wow.
It's quite crazy.
I can't wait till they get Warzone on the 3DS this year. I'm waiting.
Don't give them ideas, they'll do it.
I'm waiting for that port. Activision, give me a call. I've got great ideas. But I mean, they've got and this is going to sound like a weird analogy, but they've got enough to sustain them, I suppose, with Warzone, technically they've got Black Ops Cold War, which they have updated. I can't say they've done nothing to it, because they have, considering what it was like at the very beginning and launch. Yeah. And they've got Call of Duty Mobile as well.
Oh, that's true.
Which is also probably a cash cow for them, so they've got enough to sustain them at least until the next century. But it is a shame, in a way, that there's not going to be a new one, but maybe it's for the best. I
guess yeah. we'll hope it's for the best, but let's see what next year's entry is like.
Oh god, it's going to be like a remake of Advanced Warfare.
Yeah. Well, now Sledgehammer's gone, that might just be done for.
That is a severe possibility. Well, that or Infinity Warfare.
Oh,
or Infinite Warfare.
That's not coming back. Nobody wants that apart from you.
No, just like you wanting Ghost.
No, get him Ghost well before Infinite Warfare.
Oh god, we have got. I love how we're arguing about that, and people are just terrible taste. The both of you. It's yeah, we know.
Speak for yourself. I have awesome taste.
Oh god, I can't wait. All I can say is I can't wait till we do a T-posing episode on Call of Duty Ghosts. I'm calling you. Yeah, I'm calling you out now to play it.
I'm calling you out to play it, my friend. I'm flexing my muscles. I can't wait to talk about that one.
Oh yeah, that is an interesting one, which we will cover in another episode of both Satsunami and T-posing.
Don't use your snarky tone to diminish Call of Duty Ghosts. I see your game.
Well, yeah, what
you
game?
Sly dog.
I didn't see a game. I just see a series of sequences. With a dog.
Just trying to rile me up now.
What was it we were saying to rile people up again? Oh yeah, it was being fans of Delta Force. Yeah, that's it.
We would rile people up if those people existed, but I refuse to believe there is anybody.
Yeah, probably. There's one guy listening to this sitting in I don't know, Missouri, just oh man, they were my favourite guys. So yeah, once again, Adam, thank you so much for joining me on this this wonderful, totally not depressing callback to these games. And yeah, if you want to see more of my content, you can catch me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook, and of course Twitch, under the name Satsunami42. If you want to catch more Satsunami episodes as well, then you can find them on Anchor, Spotify, and all good podcasting distributors. Yeah, if you go into iTunes, Castbox, Breaker, I think, Adam, what do you use?
I use Spotify, so I can't. Sorry,
Spotify as well. You heard the man. Spotify, everywhere essentially. Yeah, you can.
All good distributors.
Yeah, if you have Spotify, Anchor, or just any podcasts app, then type in Satsunami. We'll be there, and I mean that in the least creepy way possible. And I say that's we'll be there. We will be listening to see what you have to say about us. One more thing, you can also catch us on YouTube at Satsunami42, where we are doing a new series called T-posing, which is basically a Let's Play series where we're playing through, just really a random bunch of games. So Adam, you and I are playing through Heavy Rain, which has honestly, despite the content, it has been a blast.
Oh, it's so much fun.
It's so funny. And yes, with Green Shield and I, we have been playing Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, of course, and of course our escapades in Verdansk, which, if you haven't checked it out, please feel free to go and check it out at YouTube. That's at Satsunami42. And hope you enjoy. As always, stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, I was trying to think of another thing to end it, but have you got anything?
Stay frosty.
Stay frosty. Oh, Jesus, that's a good one.
Just came to me as a flash.
Stay safe, stay awesome, stay frosty, as Adam said, and most importantly, guys, stay hydrated. Bye, guys.
Bye.